Welcome, everyone. I'm just making sure everyone can get in. Disabled the um, waiting room, and this webinar is being recorded. So just keep that in mind as if you unmute yourself, which you have the capacity to, it's being recorded. If you need to step away for a phone call or any other reason, feel free to mute yourself and turn your camera off. Those are kind of just our major housekeeping. If you have any issues or need anything during this webinar, I am with Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, so I'm going to be here providing tech support as well. And if you have any questions for the presenters today, feel free to drop those in chat. I'll be monitoring, and they'll be taking those throughout the whole time. So, without further ado, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dalton. Hello, everyone. Glad to see you joining us today for our session on competency-based education. You may have seen me present on this at the conference, Strategies at Work conference in February. IVCC started a CBE program last fall, and the intent of it was to allow for another method of instruction, particularly with the companies we work with and incumbent workers, as we have always been told that we cannot produce students who are competent in industrial electricity fast enough. And for numerous years, we have been asked to come up with some type of format program where students could work at their own pace, start when they want, jump in where they want, and earn a certificate or credential without necessarily having to start, in a certificate or degree program that starts in, August or January, and just be more flexible in general. So we, a year ago, or over a year ago now, through the ADOMAC grant, looked at exploring a CBE program. And at that time, through ADOMAT, they partnered us with CBEN, Competency-Based Education Network. And at that point, I had met Ryan, and he led a session for a group of consortium members here at IVCC. And he was able to provide a great overview and help guide us as to how CBE looks in the credit world, but also the non-credit world. Because where I sit in continuing education, we were looking for, I guess we weren't really sure what we were looking for at the beginning, but at the end of the day, decided the best way for IVCC to pursue this at this time was through a non-credit CBE program. So Ryan is with us today. And I'll give you a little bit of background information on him. Ryan's decade of work in post-secondary CBE positions led him to working with CBEN in colleges and universities across the country and around the world. Ryan is a unique voice in the national CBE landscape, as his expertise transcends both the academic and operational considerations with CBE. Prior to joining CBEN, Ryan managed the University of Wisconsin Flexible Option, one of the nation's vanguard portfolios of competency-based academic programs. He has helped dozens of colleges and universities build, refine, and scale their CBE options, including ours at IVCC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who will be doing the first portion of today's program, and then I will talk a little more about IVCC's spin on it. So thanks, Ryan, for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, folks. It is good to see you all. Glad to be with you all here this morning. I come to you from the faraway land to the north in Madison, Wisconsin, and I've been a frequent traveler throughout Illinois and meeting with a lot of institutions throughout the state, and so glad to be with you all here today. I have got about 25 or so minutes of remarks that I'd like to share here to help orient you all to competence-based education. As I'm going, please feel free to throw any questions in the chat, especially if it's a point of clarification that you'd like me to make. And so don't hesitate to do that. I also see y'all are a cameras off crew, which is totally fine. I'm fine speaking into the ether. But if you would like to show your face so I can read some nonverbal cues and how things are going, I also welcome that as well. So I'm glad to be with you all here today. Throw questions in the chat, and we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, so our goal here today is to talk very high level about competency-based education. As a short, brief background, Jennifer mentioned this in kind of the bio that she gave, but I work for an organization called CBEN, which is the Competency-Based Education Network. We are the leading nonprofit that is advocating and advancing high-quality competency-based education in the post-secondary space. A member-based organization that has evolved over the last 15 years to really meet the needs of the modern learner by better connecting systems of learning and systems of work through competency-based education. And so CBEN, if you're interested in learning more about CBE beyond what I covered today, as an organization, it'd be great for you all to be engaged or involved or come to our conference or reach out and review some of our resources to help situate that. I like to start off any conversation about CBE by centering in this kind of lofty philosophical space, which oftentimes folks roll their eyes at when I start at this, and then they connect the dots that I'm trying to connect here, which is to say, if we're talking about education, then we need to situate the relationship that the methods of education have with the goals of education. The function of education is the successful transfer of knowledge and skill from a pupil from a teacher to a pupil. In tandem with that transfer of knowledge and skill, it is also passing on the tools to be able to generate new knowledge. So the great torch relay race of human history is based off of this intergenerational transfer of everything that the prior generation learned to the next one, along with the skills to build new knowledge. And so we as a species have exponentially grown in what we know and can do. So if our goal of education is the successful transfer of knowledge and skill from a teacher to a learner, emphasis on the word successful, this is something I really want to drive into, then pedagogy is the methodology by which we do achieve the goals of education. And there is an innumerable number of different pedagogies, literally an incalculable number that transcend across cultures and places of how we actually successfully transfer knowledge and skill. Competency-based education is just one of many pedagogies. And you'll see I have several examples on the screen, from Montessori method to problem-based learning to flipped classrooms to programmed instruction and apprenticeships, right? There are so many different methods and means by which we achieve our goals of education. CBE is just one of those. And its focus as a educational philosophy or as an idea is grounded in that idea and that premise of what does it look like to build an educational model around success. The idea that we are successfully transferring knowledge and skill from a teacher to a pupil. So in order to define that, competence-based education is grounded on a set of competencies. Competencies weave together knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors in an applied context. Competencies are not a synonym for a skill. A lot of folks will use those interchangeably. A skill is one part of a competency. Competencies weave together what you know and need to be able to do in a particular context. And so when we think about the structure of a competency-based education program, the place that it starts first and foremost are the set of competencies that make it up. In a competency-based approach, I don't care anything about courses. I care about competencies. A course is just a vehicle to deliver competencies. So regardless if we're talking about credit or non-credit learning systems, the curriculum development process is exactly the same, which is charting and identifying what competencies form the underlying bedrock of your curriculum. And it's important to note that competencies do not exist in isolation from practice. Competencies are applied and it is performance-based in nature. You won't find competency-based education programs in the country that are primarily theoretical. CBE is a primarily applied approach to teaching and learning. And so competency-based education, as the name suggests, is focused on students' successful mastery of the competencies that have been defined in its curriculum. The only metric of success is mastery of competencies, not the amount of time spent, not the pathway taken, not how many hours their butt was in a seat, not how many times they raised their hand in class. The sole measure of progress is the successful mastery of the competencies, not the time or the exact pathway taken. This is CBE's most disruptive calling card compared to many other educational approaches, which is this idea that feels both radical and intuitive, that people learn at different rates. And we should create an educational system that allows and facilitates people to learn at different rates and not arbitrarily cutting them off before they've been able to achieve mastery of the competencies. And instead saying, our goal is for you able to do these 5, 10, 15, however many competencies there are in your program. And you're going to take as much time or as little time as necessary to be able to do those 5, 10, 15 things. Right. So our the underlying structure of a competency-based curriculum is the competencies, and learners' progression through that curriculum is based solely on their mastery of those competencies, not the time or pathway taken. So let's zoom in on this just a touch. I fly a lot for work and I'm on the road a lot, and this is oftentimes an analogy or a metaphor that folks can really get behind, which is this oversimplified representation on the screen here of the 7 different stages of flight. And I know it's way more complicated than this, but we're going to just run with the simple version here. In a traditional educational approach, where mastery is not a prerequisite for progress, learners need only to do well enough on enough of the competencies in order to be able to continue to make progress. Stated differently, if you had a pilot doing these 7 stages, which 2 of these do you want them to not be able to do? Because 5 out of 7 is 72%, and C's get degrees. And so if we allow people to progress through a credential based off of an average performance and also cut them off from taking the time necessary to truly achieve mastery, we result in a product of people graduating with known skill deficiencies. So when employers say, hey, gosh, we have graduates from your program that can't do X, Y, and Z, we can't be surprised because we sit at commencement and we watch people walk across the stage who had C's in classes, who we know full well did not have full command of material, but did well enough on enough things that they passed. Because our standards don't expect people to achieve the high level of mastery on every single component part. And so if we were producing pilots that can only do 5 out of 7 of these, it's no wonder why workforce commonly has a high degree of agitation when it comes to colleges and universities' performance as it relates to graduates. You can't open up Inside Higher Ed or the Chronicle of Higher Ed without some reference to a skills gap, right? Commonly, it's actually not a skills gap. It's an assessment gap. We're teaching the right things, but we're not requiring that our graduates can actually do them. And that's an important paradigm shift that we're trying to address. So we measure mastery through authentic performance-based assessments. So if I have this claim of mastery, which is a pretty bold claim, mind you, to say that every one of my graduates will master every one of the competencies in my program, I need to have a pretty rigorous system to ensure that that claim that I'm making is in fact valid and verifiable. So in this situation, or in competency-based education, we're measuring competence through observed competence. Stated slightly differently, for me to certify you as being competent in X, I need to have seen you do X. Not write a paper about doing X, not taking a multiple choice exam about doing X, doing X, right? Writing a paper about doing something and doing something are 2 completely different skill sets. I commonly give the example in my doctoral program on the other side of the river from you all at the University of Iowa. I took a class called Facilitating Intercultural Initiatives. On my transcript, it's the title of the class, Facilitating Intercultural Initiatives. I got an A minus. And if I were to go to an employer and say, here's my transcript, they would read that and say, oh, amazing. You are someone, given that you got an A minus in this class at a highly reputable institution, can facilitate intercultural initiatives. And that employer would be surprised to find out that in that class, I facilitated precisely 0 intercultural initiatives. The entire class was theoretical, and the final project was we wrote a paper responding to a case study of how I would design and facilitate such an initiative. And this is where employers get frustrated because they're like, writing a paper about doing something and doing it are totally different things. So we really want to try to emphasize when we say that someone is competent in X, Y, or Z, we've actually observed them performing X, Y, or Z. which allows us to make a claim of transparency differently in competency-based education compared to many other of those pedagogies that I described earlier, which is that I can produce a list of the competencies in each and every one of the competency-based education programs. There might be five, there might be 50, however many there are defined by the faculty in partnership with employer partners. I can say, here's the list of competencies right here, transparent, clear, clean, easy. And because competencies are the same language that employers use, there's no translation required between course titles and what someone can actually do. I don't have to guess at what's covered in English 101, and I have to make some assumptions of like, well, you probably wrote some papers, but I don't know what that means, right? I'm instead seeing, here's a list of things that you can do as a result of that learning experience. Competencies are not learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are an academic artifact. Competencies are a workforce artifact. We're directly using the language of work to be able to eliminate the need for a Rosetta Stone between higher ed and the workforce. We're speaking the same language. So when employers say, I need someone who can do X, Y, and Z, our program's curriculum is structured around X, Y, and Z. And then second, because mastery of every competency is required, I know that each and every one of my graduates can do every competency. If a program has 100 competencies and someone masters 99 and not 100, they do not graduate until they master all 100. And this is a rigorous standard. And in some ways, it kind of terrifies people because they're used to minimally 13 years of education, let alone probably another 2 to 4 years of post-secondary experience on average, where average was fine. And so in a competency-based approach, average is no longer satisfactory, and that's a paradigm shift. So the characteristics of CBE really focus on this idea that curriculum should be grounded on competencies, and those describe what someone know and can do in an applied context. Learners have to master each and every one of those competencies. They can do so in a time variable environment. So if I'm able to demonstrate mastery more quickly than someone else, delightful, fine, wonderful. If I need more time to fully get command of the competency before I progress, wonderful, you take more time. Instead of saying the midterm is October 15th, and if you're not ready, bummer for you, and now you're going to get a grade and it's one and done assessment, and sorry, instead it's take some extra time, study, learn, work with your faculty member, connect with your employer partners, do what you got to do to get to the place where you feel confident before you're able to take that assessment, which helps ensure that you can actually do the things expected of you. And then we also design systems that measure mastery that focus on performance of the competency. CBE's philosophical predecessor is behavioralism. For any psychologists on the call, for better or for worse, there are a lot of critiques of behavioralism. There's a lot of great things about behavioralism, but at the end of the day, that's kind of the parent philosophy, which argues that education is most effective when it's about observed behavior change. Can someone do something as a result of learning experience they could not do prior to that learning experience? And can I observe that change? And so a CBE fundamentally, as a pedagogy, is about teaching and learning. Learners work with faculty on a one-to-one basis in a personalized learning environment in order to be able to demonstrate mastery of the competencies. And this is a common misconception of CBE. A lot of folks think that it's entirely asynchronous independent, that there is no faculty-student interaction, that it's just self-teaching, and the faculty is reduced to being just a grader instead of a teacher. All of those pieces that I mentioned are not accurate representations of what a well-designed CBE system looks like. There is a high degree of interaction between faculty and students, both within and beyond an assessment context. There's a significant emphasis on personalized wraparound support from the faculty to the individual student. Rather than large didactic instruction, it's more cohorts of one. And so I'm working with Dalton or Kristen or Debbie or Elizabeth on individual needs to help ensure that you get to the level of mastery necessary, recognizing that Jennifer's path to mastery and Debbie's path to mastery are different. And I'm working with you on that one-to-one basis to get you both to that destination. Think about this like Google Maps, right? When I type into Google Maps a destination, I want to go to the grocery store. It gives me three routes: the fastest route, the fuel-efficient route, and then the route that's interesting and dynamic. That's the faculty relationship with students here. My goal is to get you to the destination. but there's always more than one path to get there. There's always more than one way around the mountain, right? And so I'm going to work with you on an individual level that honors your experience and your goals and your schedule and your timeline to get you to that destination. And you, as the learner, have agency in helping drive that path forward. So as a result, CBE recenters teaching and learning on the learner itself. It is a deeply learner-centric approach to education. Many traditionalist approaches to teaching and learning are highly faculty-centric, meaning the faculty member is the one who's driving and directing all of the functions of that learning experience. In competency-based education, it's the learner who is driving the bus, and the faculty member is in the passenger seat saying, here's some possible directions that you can go, much like Google Maps. And if you get off track, Google Maps is going to redirect you back, right? It's that coach, that guide, that mentor. And so CBE programs are in many ways self-directed, but I don't love that phrase because self-directed carries this implication that you're alone, and that could not be farther from the truth. But you do have agency in that, which means that faculty's teaching and learning experience differs. Now, this slide is overly reductionist, and I acknowledge that out of the gate. This is presenting something that's black and white that is not black and white. But bear with me for a moment, because I think it's a useful explanation of how teaching differs. And particularly in a non-credit space, this is something that, because the regulations are substantially different, you can actually really lean into on a much greater way than credit-bearing programs can, which is this shift from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side approach to teaching. On the left, what you're seeing is commonly called, and CBEN didn't invent this language. Sage on the stage and guide on the side is language that's been around for, gosh, 5 to 6 decades. But really, this emphasis shows that the traditionalist approach to education is very one-directional, from a teacher to a pupil. Paulo Freire, arguably the greatest scholar of pedagogy in the 20th century, calls this the banking theory of education, where I, as the instructor, deposit knowledge at regular intervals in you as a pupil. You are a passive vestibule for that deposit. And then at regular intervals, I'm expecting you to regurgitate that deposit back to me in the same form at which I deposited it. Thus, I become both the source of truth and the judge of truth, right? This was my entire educational experience across all of K-12 and 3 academic degrees, which was you spend a semester learning from a sage, they give you all sorts of knowledge, and then you're completing various exams that show the extent to which you retained the knowledge provided. There's very little room for creativity and agency in that model. I mean, I remember as an undergraduate student, final exams being based directly off lecture notes. And so if you weren't at the lecture, you wouldn't be able to pass the exam, even if you already had knowledge of that particular topic, because it was so esoterically written, such that if you didn't have it from the way the faculty member taught it, you couldn't get it, right? Like, and that's normal. It's this idea of that faculty as the source and judge of truth. On the right, what you're seeing is a constructivist philosophy in education. So think Jean Piaget or Vygotsky, which argue that learning is more effective when the learner has agency in their learning. And so they are able to walk alongside the faculty, not in a directive relationship, but in a collaborative relationship. So in a competency-based teaching system, that destination is fixed. Everyone's going to get those competencies, however many there are, 5, 10, 15, 30, 300, doesn't matter. However many competencies are, everyone's going to get there. But how you get there is up to you. You might go fast, you might go slow. You might need to read a ton, or you might read very little. You might be able to draw upon a lot of experience or draw upon no experience. Whatever your unique combination of life experiences, schedule, goals, learning needs are, the faculty member works with you to actualize that and get you where you need to go. But this brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions of CBE, which is this idea that you can use experience to get quote unquote credit. Uh, Competency-based programs do not give credit for what somebody already knows. That's prior learning experience, a prior learning assessment, or PLA, sometimes called credit for prior learning, or CPL. If any of you are Canadian, it's called RPL, recognition of prior learning, right? Everyone calls it something a little bit differently. But CBE and PLA are two independent and separate systems. But you'll notice on my Venn diagram here, they overlap by like 5%, because there is this recognition that there's a touch of interdependency there. So let me kind of break down this difference. And I know in non-credit, this difference matters less, but if you ever intend to transcribe or convert a non-credit program into credit, this distinction will matter a great deal, which is that for federal financial aid purposes, Title IV financial aid cannot be awarded for programs that give credit for experience. When created in 1965, the federal financial aid apparatus at the height of the Cold War was primarily designed to upskill and reskill the American citizenry to stay competitive against the Soviets, right? 1965, height of the Cold War, creating federal financial aid as we know it. And so as a result, it is not designed to be used to simply validate what someone already knows. Federal government and taxpayers, by extension, did not have an incentive to do that. I don't care what you already know. I need you to know new things. So as a result, PLA is not eligible for Title IV financial aid. Prior learning assessment is a separate function from the existing systems that govern both tuition and the payment of that tuition. So pedagogically, PLA and CBE differ in that PLA is a transactional system. There's no teaching that's occurring, whereas competency-based education is a pedagogical system. Teaching is occurring. Now, I might use my experience to move more quickly, but accelerating is different than skipping, right? And that's a nuanced but important distinction. Going more fast through something, more quickly through something because I already have some degree of aptitude in that area is different than altogether being waived or test out of that because of that prior experience. An important nuance. So CBE's balancing point, if you remember one thing that I said today, it would be this slide, which is this kind of culmination of everything that I've covered. Competency-based education, on one hand, has an incredibly rigorous system of academic performance behind it. Students have to master every competency. Mastery is defined at a higher level of academic performance than non-mastery scores. Cs do not get degrees in CBE. Learners have to demonstrate that mastery through performance-based assessment, not cognitive assessment. And ask any psychometrician over the last 80 years, performance-based assessments are harder than cognitive-based assessments, right? The standard of performance is higher and the expectations of performance are higher. On the other side of the scale, no pedagogy is more flexible than CBE. It's self-directed. Learners have agency in when they're completing their coursework. If you're not ready for the assessment, take more time. You have multiple attempts on every assessment. It's all focused on individualized instruction with the faculty member. And so you're working on a one-to-one basis instead of disappearing into a large lecture hall forgotten about, right? Really individual, really flexible, high degree of learner agency. But these exist in balance because one without the other and a competency-based system fails. If we have these really high expectations of academic rigor and absolutely no flexibility to meet them, no one's going to enroll in your program, first of all. And second of all, they're going to be so riddled with test anxiety that they're not going to be able to perform. And on the other hand, if we said, you've got max flexibility, do whatever you want, we got no standards, but do whatever you want, we're all human. I'm going to choose the absolute bare minimum, the path of least resistance. That me as Ryan, I am not doing any more than is reasonably expected of me. And so if you give me max flexibility and no expectations of performance, I'm going to absolutely abuse that max flexibility. I often joke at work, people be like, how long do you need to do XYZ project? And I often say, however many days you give me, I'm doing it on the last day either way. So if you give me 3 months, I'm doing it on 2 months and 28 days. If you give me 1 month, I'm doing it in 28 days. I'm not doing it now. I'm doing it when I need to, right? Like that proclivity to procrastinate is going to kick in. So these two pieces exist in balance. We have these high levels of academic rigor because we give people the means to achieve it. I want to center just a little bit longer on this time variability piece because this is the most disruptive element of competency-based education and also the most empowering. Particularly in a non-credit space, you all have a ton of flexibility and freedom when it comes to time variability that credit-bearing programs just simply do not have. Credit-bearing programs are required to specify a number of hours associated with that learning experience. A 3 credit hour course is 135 hours of student effort. Very prescriptive, very unflexible learning systems. And if you don't align to those number of hours, you get in trouble by your creditor, by the feds, lawsuits. It's a whole big thing, right? So very restrictive time environments in a credit-bearing space. In a non-credit space, you have, for better or for worse, way less regulations in that regard, and have the flexibility to actually really truly actualize a time variable learning environment, which is why nationally many competency-based programs start out in a non-credit space and move to a credit space after they kind of get their feet wet with the pedagogy in that non-credit learning environment before dealing with all the regulations and systems therein. And so when we say time variability in CBE, that's time variability as a function of two things, calendars and clocks. And that's an important distinction because some people will give time variability with clocks, but not calendars, or vice versa. So when I say time variability on calendars, that means there are no fixed deadlines within a competency-based system. You're completing the coursework whenever you want, which allows that kind of acceleration or deceleration that is so famous about CBE programs. So rather than saying you got to sit here for 16 weeks, bummer if you could have done it in 8, and bummer if you needed 20, it's 16, right? That's a system that is governed by a calendar. And then on the other hand, variability in clocks. You spend as much or as little time as necessary to master the competency. The only thing that matters is mastering the competency. So if it takes Jennifer 10 hours and it takes Debbie 15 hours, cool. And if it takes Alex 30 hours, delightful. I don't care how long it takes. I care that you get there. And so that focus on separating time, both in calendars and in clocks, allows true liberation in learning. In other words, all that matters is learning. And you do the thing that you set out to be able to do, take as long or short as you need to get there. And that's innovation in higher ed. So in summary, this is my second black and white slide that is overly black and white, but we're going to just run with it for rhetorical purposes. Don't look at this as traditional bad, CBE good. I got a lot of critiques of CBE, and there's a lot of great things about traditional. This is not a good bad chart. This is just simply a differences chart. The focus of education in CBE is on the outcome. I care how you got there. I don't care how you got there. Whereas in traditional educational approaches, the focus is primarily on the process. The assessment paradigm in CBE is behavioral. What can you do? I'm observing your performance of the competency, not cognitive. Employers don't pay you to sit there and know things. They expect you to do something with that knowledge. So knowledge for knowledge's sake is something that a competency-based system is uninterested in. Knowledge is in service of performance. The learner controls the pace, and progression is based solely on achievement of the competencies, not the advancement of a calendar or a clock. We organize our curriculum based off competencies, not courses. I don't care about courses, I care about competencies. And the target of instruction is the individual. Each learner will achieve each and every one of the competencies. And experience is integrated as opposed to ignored. I remember when I was an undergraduate student, pretty much every class had like the token non-traditional student who was like, in my mind at the time, like 50, and they were probably 33, right? But when you're 18, your perspectives of people's ages are very wrong, right? And they're sitting in the class, and they're like, I could teach this class, but I have to sit here for 16 weeks, right? Their experience is not being integrated into that learning experience, right? So that's what we mean when we say integrated experience in CBE. So with that, hopefully that was a helpful, super fast crash course in CBE. I do an 8-hour version of what I just covered, going into far greater detail and depth on all of the nuances here. But would love if folks have any quick questions for me. Nothing appeared in the chat as I was chatting. So, but any questions that folks have before I pass it over to Jennifer, I'm happy to take.
It's a lot to think about. And I loved how he used the word uncomfortable, because as we worked to develop our program, it was super uncomfortable because it was undoing the way we've done everything forever, right? We schedule classes that are a certain number of hours that meet on these days. We pay the instructor a set amount, usually based on the amount of time. We had to, like, you have to take all that off the board and start at ground zero and build competencies, and then the rest follows. So I appreciated you saying that because it felt uncomfortable. And sometimes it still feels uncomfortable because like something will come up and then we'll be like, oh no, but it's not based on time, or oh, these students, these learners are taking so long to complete. Well, that's okay. Like we
Mm.
have to, because we thought everyone would do it right away, right? They want to get in and get out. But to Ryan's point, we're meeting them where they are and they're in control of their journey. So it's okay if someone doesn't complete in 10 weeks. But we have to keep reminding ourselves that as well, because we are not conditioned to think that way based on how we've always operated. So I think I saw something pop up in the chat here. Jake says, thank you for this. Very helpful as we navigate developing this both on the credit and non-credit side.
I see Jeremy's question is there progress towards offering Title IV funding for CBE programs? So in the credit world, CBE programs are eligible for federal financial aid. Title IV, they're eligible for VA benefits. There's no prohibition against the use of Title IV for competency-based education. And so there are plenty of programs at scale nationally that are using federal financial aid just like any other program. So is it complicated? Yes. Is it doable? Absolutely. It can be done because it has been done.
Do you happen to have any specific uh, rubrics that share what mastery really looks like? I feel like it's kind of subjective, and it's something that we have integrated into one of our programs. And actually, um, the program that I'm talking about is called Community Health Worker. And we have this new training, and it's all competency based. And just this week, I extended probably half of the classes date of finishing because they really, I mean, they're in the workforce, they're busy, and they need more time. And I love that flexibility.
Yeah.
I find myself though kind of stuck with like mastery can mean something different to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. So I did throw in the chat an article I wrote on this topic last fall about how to define mastery. The short answer is um, every institution, there, we don't have any national framework for mastery writ large. Each institution defines it in their process of building an academic program. Some academic disciplines have a parent accreditor who has defined the thresholds of mastery on behalf of all of the disciplines in that accreditor. The easiest example of this is nursing. So AACN in 2021 produced the Essentials. It's a set of competencies and mastery criteria. Every nursing program in the country uses it. It's required by your accreditor to use it. There's not really a lot of question about what constitute mastery because it's a universal standard. Not every field has that. In fact, very few fields have that. So most are faculty at individual programs defining what mastery is. Now, this is where something really important comes out, and you'll see this in the article that I referenced. The competencies are the bedrock of your competence-based system. But underneath every competency is a set of what we call performance indicators. Usually there's 4 to 8 per competency. Those performance indicators are what do the heavy lifting of describing the conditions of mastery for that competency in that context. And so if I were to say I've mastered the competency active listening, and you were to say, well, what does that look like? And I rattle off, well, I repeat back what was stated to me. I lean forward when someone's talking. I'm not on my phone when someone's describing something. I'm doing some mm-hms and ahas, some nonverbal indications of interest, right? Those things that I'm rattling off are the conditions of mastery of the competency active listening. So what we do when we say someone has that competency, we can then publish those performance indicators so that it's transparent about what they did to show mastery of that. And then ideally, and Illinois actually is a really good example of this in early childhood education, you collaborate across credential levels to show here's how an associate degree active listener differs from a doctoral level active listener, right? Or everything in between. So in early childhood education in Illinois, there's a 6-tier framework of levels of mastery across a unified set of competencies through the entire ECE profession that's been adopted by, I don't know, 74 or 75 of the 76 community colleges in the state of Illinois. And so you can say, eliminate that question of what mastery is because it's a uniform framework of showing I have it at tier two. You can say, great, a tier two master at this can do X, Y, and Z. I need for this job a tier three. So I'm going to look for someone, right? Like it really unlocks quite a lot when you start thinking about it in that way.
Jeremy, you mentioned you wanted to clarify something before.
Yeah, so one of the things we did this year, we started a big apprenticeship program. And in in lieu of that, we also converted a large amount of our welding to CBE, straight CBE. We still offer traditional, but now we're switching to CBE as well. Well, for the employer we were working with specifically, he wanted to have like an industrial safety, a technical mathematics class involved as well. Those are not CBE. So when you mix CBE and non-CBE, that's when the funding gets really, really hairy.
Yeah. Yeah, great question, Jeremy. So I'm assuming everyone on the call has HLC as their accreditor. If you don't, that's fine, but just regionally, they pretty much accredited everybody on in our region. And HLC is very clear that competency-based programs require substantive credit bearing. To be clear, credit bearing. Competency-based education programs require substantive change with them as an accreditor. That's the highest level of accreditation review. And as part of that, they define a competency-based program that requires substantive change as either 51% of the whole credential or the whole major or the whole gen ed. So, in that situation that you're describing, Jeremy, it is allowable to have a program for which, say, the major is competency based and the gen ed is not. It would still require subchange approval in that case, which is that highest level of authority, but there's not a prohibition necessarily on that being structured in that way, technically. Practically, uh, it almost always breaks down as a system. There are very few true hybrid programs operating at scale in the US because once you start looking at it from the eyes of the student, a hybrid system kind of begins to lose some of its appeal of like, I came to this because I can control my pace. What do you mean for this one random class, I got to sit here for 16 weeks? Like, that's not why I enrolled in this program. Or I came to this program because of the ability to not to be able to accelerate or decelerate, but these three classes I can't. Like, it starts to feel like you bought a new car, but some of the stuff on that new car doesn't quite work the way you expected it to work. So I really encourage as a matter of best practice, even if it's regulatorily allowed to mix and match, I like to just the whole program from zero to whatever is delivered in a competency-based system because in my view, it's the most seamless and cleanest student experience.
Did that help, Jeremy?
Yeah, sorry.
That
And
clarify?
that's kind of the conclusion we came to was, I mean, these two classes will probably be one of the ones we look at next to convert to CBE to kind of make the whole program CBE from top to bottom. But it was just this was our kind of first whack at it, and we immediately ran into those problems and didn't hit a wall, but it was like, you know, okay, we got to adjust.
Yeah, CBE for better for worse is one of those things that like if you're gonna do it, you got to do the whole thing. Institutions that kind of piecemeal, like oh, we'll do two classes here or three classes there, almost always run into the barrier, Jeremy, that you described. I hear that nationally incredibly commonly, and I even in like when I do retroactives with institutions, and they're like, yeah, the lesson that we learned is that we should have just done the whole thing on day one. We ended up spending more time by piecemealing it. So but that requires a different change management approach, right? So that's why I said for better or for worse.
Yeah, thank you.
Ryan, I have one question. Could you talk a little bit about completers? We're in such a world where you're always measured by completers. And I think for me, that's where I get a little anxiety because, they're on their own. They set their own pace, learners set their own pace,
Yeah.
and they don't I mean, not to say they won't complete, but like they could take a year to complete content that could technically be completed in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because, we're always wanting to show positive numbers and they're always sort of hanging out there.
Yeah. The Achilles heel of a competency-based system is when self-paced becomes no-paced learning. And so what I always emphasize as a matter of program design is yes, learners control the pace, But if I'm the faculty member, I'm calling them every week. I'm texting them. I'm showing up at their door if I have to. If they're not showing reasonable progress towards the credential, because very short anecdote. So in the 60s, there was a series of kind of widely considered the original pilot CBE programs. They were funded by the US government. They were all in teacher education, and all 10 of them failed in terms of their programs, graduation rates in the single digits, just objective failed programs. And in the late 60s, they all came together and they did this big study and they published it and they said, what did we do wrong? And the number one thing that they identified that they did wrong was that they treated it as effectively correspondence education, which was, all right, go do these things. It's self-paced. Good luck. And didn't have that the what and why I spend so much time harping on pedagogy. They just simply didn't have the teaching philosophy that undergirds modern CBE. And so I think, Jennifer, the biggest piece that I emphasize is if you're not careful, graduation rates for CBE programs can become trash pretty quickly. And so really trying to emphasize with your learners of yes, you have agency and yes, you have flexibility. And those things are incredibly empowering. And also, with great power comes great responsibility. You got to still do it. You can't not do it. So, really trying to emphasize and create systems that support them and encourage and reward them as they make forward progress.
Very good. Thank you. And Jeremy just added, this is the very reason they tied their first few programs to apprenticeships, because there's a lot of buy-in, not only from the student, by the employer, for completion and to make that person successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that.
As we transition, that's a good transition into the program at IVCC as well, because that's sort of what we did with employers, not necessarily in the apprenticeship program, but in looking to incumbent workers to attend our program. But thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your time, and feel free to stick with us for the next 15 minutes if your schedule allows. But yeah, it's great stuff. And the hardest part is just getting it set up and doing it. And then it sort of runs as it should. And I'll explain how we have taken this approach at IVCC.
Love it. Excellent. I will hang out a little bit here. They're redoing my windows. I should have explained to the person walking behind me a few times, but I thought that, if I don't say anything, no one will notice it. So I'll be here in the background. If other folks have questions, I can chime in and answer them.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Can you all see my screen now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Very
It's
good.
coming.
Okay. So IVCC, basically, as I mentioned, uh-oh, because I'm going to crash. Am I still there? I hope.
Maybe stop
Okay.
sharing and try again.
Oh, it stopped sharing it? Okay.
At least for me, it's just a black screen still.
Okay, yeah, I did get.
Okay, cool. Not just me.
Oh, well, wait, hold on. Let me try it again. I got the notification that we were gonna crash. Are we good? Can you see it now?
I do not see it.
Yeah,
Just a black screen.
Yeah, it's still there.
Is it black?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just took a second.
Okay, very good. So, we took a step in this direction because it was requirement of a grant.
You're muted now.
Keep getting the crashing command, and then it just sort of boots me out and back in. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Nope.
Okay, I'm gonna give it one more shot, and if
Yeah.
not, I'm just gonna have to wing it and talk about it. And while I'm pulling this up, I have my colleague Jennifer Sowers with me. She was instrumental in getting the our CBE program up and running, as was Lexus Buckley. Both of them worked with employers and our faculty member here at the college to develop this program. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, fingers crossed. So anyway, moving right along, we decided to pursue CBE in industrial electricity because this was an area that we had received a lot of input from employers that we needed to produce graduates or students, those with skill, faster than we currently do in any of our programs here at IVCC. After much discussion, it was determined we would start in the non-credit world simply because, number one, we could do it quicker and easier, and we wouldn't necessarily have to get into all of the concerns with financial aid, with records, with accounting and all of that. So, the end goal at some point in time may be to roll this into credit. As Ryan said, this typically is, a sequencing thing, and it starts in non-credit and moves to credit. But we're sort of just now in the trial phases, and we're seeing how it will go. So this was our promotional flyer for the spring. And I'm gonna have to stop sharing. Maybe I'm not going to show you this flyer. Anyway, I'm going to keep talking. So what we did is we developed 5 modules, 5 electrical modules that equated to some of our credit classes. So we chose an IVCC faculty member to lead the project. So he basically looked at his courses and broke those down into different modules that then equated to competencies within each. And so the ones you're seeing are Electrical Systems 1, Industrial Electronic Systems, Electric Motors and Controls, Troubleshooting, and Installation. Back in the spring, or when we started this in the fall, we just had 2 modules ready to go. In the spring, we rolled out the rest of them. And literally, we're at the point now where all 5 are able, students can register for. And upon successful completion, if they wish, they can obtain, or through the credit for prior learning process at IVCC, they can obtain the college credit. So we're sort of doing it, instead of doing them as credit to begin with, we made it work in the non-credit world. And for those who are certificate or degree seeking, we can grant them credit for prior learning. Okay, so the course format, open entry. They can start a course on any Tuesday. Okay, we do ask that they register for the module by the Wednesday before. We put this into place just to make sure we had time to respond here to do the things we need to do on our end to give them access to their course class. Currently, we are giving students 10 weeks to complete each module. So though technically we understand there isn't supposed to be any time constraint, we did give a parameter. And I'll be honest, students are pushing it right up to those 10 weeks. And we're currently in discussion now on if we should just remove that altogether. Fortunately, Lexi, who is not here today, serves as our navigator in this role, and she is in constant contact with these individuals, checking in with them, urging them, congratulating them when they, hit certain milestones. But just, as Ryan said, these are individuals who are working, they're, have busy lives. And though we had hoped that them being incumbent workers, we'd have that support of their employers to push them, they're sort of allowing them to work at their own pace. So I'm not sure, like I mentioned earlier, if this is something we just have to adjust to. It's one of those things that are uncomfortable for us because we want them, to continue and move forward. But, it's sort of hit and miss as to when they complete. On average, it's taking someone about 12 weeks. So they hit that deadline and in their mind, they need to finish, and then they do it. Okay, so the format, it consists of online instruction through Brightspace. Once students complete the modules in Brightspace, they then attend Open Lab, where there's a faculty member available to assess their competency. Okay. We also offer, our faculty members offer a weekly connect session. So the dates have changed, or at different times, but say it's Thursday night from 6 to 7. Every Thursday night from 6 to 7, all students have a Zoom link. No matter where they are in any of the modules, they can hop onto that Zoom link and ask any questions of that faculty member. And then obviously our faculty member has office hours as well and is very responsive to email, texts. We see a little bit of everything going on.
I'll add to that. Since our group has been smaller, Greg communicates one-on-one with individuals at times too, which is nice. Because although Lexi keeps a tab on them, the students are free to go to Greg and he works with them. I mean, pretty much 24/7. They have access to him, which I know going forward, as your group gets bigger, that's not always ideal, but it's been very helpful in us just kind of seeing where we need to go with it in, just scheduling and how we can, better formulate everything to flow as it does. So Greg's been really great about keeping up with students on his own and working with them when needed. So the instructors have to be flexible. I mean, that's a huge piece to it.
Absolutely. Everyone has to be flexible.
Yeah.
It's a huge piece to it. So speaking of the instructors, currently we have one instructor and 2 lab assistants. And we pay the instructor per person, so per student enrolled in the class. We talked about several different options. We always, we knew we couldn't tie it to hours because for every student, it's going to take each one a different amount of hours. So we arrived on something that we thought would be mutually beneficial, to both parties. And then the lab assistants are hourly. Now those lab assistants of the 3 nights a week, like I think 1 or 2 of them are open lab for other programs as well. So, they're not being double paid. They were already there anyway. And of course, I have to mention that the strategies of work, through the strategies at work grant, we've been able to offset the cost for students by 50%. Or if those students are being sponsored by companies, the cost of the company 50%. So that's been, very instrumental in the program's launch because we've been able to do it pretty affordably for everyone involved. I'm not going to, go through every competency here, but this is once again just showing the different classes. And I would open the lab schedule, but I'm having difficulty sort of showing that. But basically 3 days.
And are you in your PowerPoint? Because I just see a Zoom
Yep.
meeting on there.
Geez. Yes, I am in my PowerPoint. I mean, yes, I am. There again, I'm sorry. It's this double screen I am going on. Is the problem. Okay, you should be
There
able
you
to
go.
see it now. Okay.
Yep.
So our pilot program, we started with electrical systems 1. I'll bring you through a couple of modules. Here are some of the competencies or the overall topics of the course. And then the competencies obviously get more specific. You can also see at the top, the purple box where it says the course is comparable to ELE 1200, Basic Industrial Electricity 1. This is actually our credit class. So, as I said, our instructor had the course. He broke down the course into competencies, made it a non-credit CBE offering. If the student successfully completes and they want to go through our credit for prior learning process, we can then award them the credit. Because our next step is to roll out to IVCC credit students. And I think we're going to have our first student coming up in the fall who wants to pursue that avenue as a way to get ahead of it. And move at a little quicker pace. Here's our second class. Third class. In this particular class, you can see it was such a, I don't know, I think it's 5 or 6 credit hours. We had to we broke it down into 2 modules for the sake of offering the course. Embedded credentials. Obviously, we know we need to be mindful of, industry recognized credentials and having the student walk away with as much as they can. So we've incorporated some of these SACA credentials into various classes. I should also mention that we're using, in our online learning platform, we're using some Amatrol training modules. So there is a cost for those classes that are utilizing an Amatrol module. There is like a fee, a bookstore fee cost as well. Skip that. Lastly, the cost of the class, $799 per module. Like I said, it's a little more expensive perhaps than a credit class. Yes and no, it's actually pretty equal. But we know, and I think individuals recognize the cost of convenience in many cases. Obviously, the use of grant funds has helped to make the cost, to reduce the cost and make it more affordable to everyone. In our first cohort, we had 8 students. 2 finished module 1 and moved into 2. Now we're waiting on them to finish 2. And then we're told that a whole new group, or right now we're doing recruiting, for new starters any day of the week that have been told by various companies, some who started in that first cohort intend to complete and move into the second. So it's very unstructured. It's very structured, but unstructured. The classes are there, the framework is there, but it's up to the students to, complete when they want. In closing, I'll say, because I know we're at time, this is really nothing. Those of you who do non-credit programming, we're basically doing this anyway, right? We always are talking competency and being able to learn X, Y, and Z and proving that you can learn X, Y, and Z. The biggest difference for us anyway, is taking that time element out of it and making it accessible all the time, and then putting the systems in place to make that actually happen. But it's been a great experience for us. We know we need to do more work to market it, and make our industry aware. It fell on a time for us. The development fell at a time for us where we had a lot of competing priorities. So we're hoping to give this more priority and then also look for other areas perhaps to expand upon. Jen, do you have anything to add?
I just think as we start to market it more, we are seeing more employers who are interested in this because they have employees who don't necessarily want to go back to college as a full-time or a part-time student, but they want to earn some sort of certificate or degree. They want something on paper. I know that some of them do say, it's just, they just want them to learn the competency, but it is also nice to have that certificate in hand saying, you've passed this or you have that certification. So I think as we continue on, we'll see more and more companies who will value this program for those employees who just need to, validate their skills.
Well said, Jen. Thank you. Okay, we are at 12:02. Are there any questions? If you have any, feel free to reach out by email. And then we had a question, Ryan, are you able to share your slides with me so that we can share them with the
I don't
audience?
typically send out the slides since
Okay.
you have the recording.
Oh,
But
sure.
if there's anyone who wants a specific reference, you're welcome to email me, and I can send that. I'll put my email in the chat. It's just ryan@cmin.org.
Very good. And I do encourage any of you who are thinking of moving in this direction, working with Stephen, our in-person session and then the interactions we had via webinar were really helpful in getting it off the ground. It's just a whole new way of thinking, but very doable in the non-credit world and not as big as a lift as you might think. Just have to rethink how we do things. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.